This guy is really the creme de la creme right now in MMA.
One of the greatest that ever was, and a great testament to this great sport.
The greatest champion in UFC history.
When Barboza was like, "Hey, you were better than me," it was almost like a shrug. It wasn't even mad. It was just when you see somebody that much better, it's.
He has shown us how much better he is than everybody else. He has not shown us how good he is.
He beat everyone he ever faced. He had 2 losses that were Matt Hughes and Matt Serra, right? And came back and destroyed them in the rematches.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are looking at some of the greatest and deadliest UFC champions of all time. If you have some suggestions to stuff you want to see on the channel, make sure to leave it down below. But for now, sit back, pop a white monster, and enjoy.
Nurmagomedov just mauled him. I mean, mauled him in a way that you go, oh, God.
You're not even there.
I mean, he is one of the toughest human beings on the planet, and he's the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, and seriously, you have to start putting him up there at GOAT status with, whoever else you think is the GOAT.
Khabib Nurmagomedov retired undefeated, 29-0, never lost a single round according to some judges. And that record doesn't even tell half the story because it's not just that he won every fight, it's how he won them. The man had a style that broke people mentally before it broke them physically. You knew what was coming. Everyone knew what was coming. Khabib was going to take you down, put you on your back, and make you suffer for 15 or 25 minutes. And knowing it didn't help. Couldn't help really, because stopping Khabib's takedowns was like trying to stop gravity. The guy was just inevitable. His pressure was suffocating. Patient, waiting for the right moment. He'd walk forward behind that jab, and when he shot in, that was it. You were going down. Didn't matter if you were an Olympic wrestler, or a knockout artist, or a submission specialist. Once Khabib decided it was time to grapple, the fight was essentially over. What made him truly deadly wasn't just the takedowns, though. It was what happened after. Most wrestlers take you down and then you can breathe a little, reset, maybe work back to your feet. Not with Khabib. He'd pass your guard like you weren't even trying to stop him. Mount, side control, back mount, didn't matter. He'd advance position and start landing those brutal ground and pound shots. Elbows, hammer fists, just relentless violence from top position. And the whole time he'd be talking to you, telling you to give up, asking you why you're even trying. Psychological warfare while he's beating you up. His title reign was something else. Defended against Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, and Justin Gaethje, 3 of the most dangerous strikers in lightweight history. And he made all of them look the same. Took them down, smashed them, finished 2 of them. The Gaethje fight especially. Justin was supposed to be this elite wrestler with knockout power. The perfect style to challenge Khabib. Lasted 2 rounds before getting triangle choked. That's the thing about Khabib's dominance. It wasn't competitive. These weren't close fights where he squeaked out decisions. He was in complete control from start to finish every single time. 29 fights. Think about that for a second. 3 decades of fighting at the highest levels, and the man never had a loss. Never had a black eye that anyone remembers. Never looked hurt. Meanwhile, his opponents would leave the octagon looking like they'd been in a car accident. Faces swollen, bodies bruised, spirits completely broken. And then he retired at 29-0. Left the sport on top. Undefeated. Undisputed. Unquestionable. Some people argue he should have stayed longer, fought more contenders, cemented the legacy even further. But honestly, what was left to prove? He'd beaten everyone they put in front of him, made the lightweight division look weak even though it was stacked with killers. That's deadly. That's dominance on a level the sport hadn't really seen before.
Like Anderson Silva when he was like 30 to 32.
Woo! Just going. I remember that. Longest reign.
You would watch him and just like put your hands to your head and go, geez.
And when he came out, it was fucking mastery. I was like blown. Then he played the ukulele. I'll never forget that.
Anderson Silva in his prime was legitimately terrifying. Not just good, not just skilled. He actually knew when he was going to shut someone's lights off. Just scary to watch. The guy had this aura in the octagon where opponents looked nervous before the fight even started. And for good reason, because Silva had maybe the most dangerous striking the UFC has ever seen. 16 consecutive wins in the UFC, 10 title defenses. The way he won those fights was just beautiful and brutal at the same time. Counter-striking that looked effortless. He'd keep his hands low, lean back away from punches, and then explode with a counter that would drop people instantly. The precision was inhuman. Guys would throw combinations and Silva would slip everything, make them miss by millimeters, and then fire back with a knee or an elbow or a straight right that ended the night. His movement was so fluid it looked like he was dancing. But this wasn't performance art. This was violence disguised as art. The front kick that knocked out Vitor Belfort is still one of the most shocking finishes in UFC history. Belfort came out aggressive, trying to pressure Silva, and Anderson just threw this front kick kick straight up the middle. Caught him clean on the chin. Vitor went down like someone cut his power cord. That kick came out of nowhere. Nobody throws front kicks in fights. Silva did. And it worked. The face connected perfectly. Then there was the Forrest Griffin fight, which might be the most disrespectful performance ever. Silva literally made Griffin look like he'd never trained a day in his life. Hands down, dodging punches with his head movement, countering with these lazy-looking shots that kept dropping Forrest. At one point, Silva knocked him down and then just walked away with his hands out like he was asking, "What else you want me to do?" He eventually finished him with a jab. A jab. Knocked out a former light heavyweight champion with a jab while barely trying. The scary part about Silva was the unpredictability. You never knew what he was going to do. Flying knee, sure. Spinning back elbow, why not? Front kick to the face, obviously. He had every weapon and he'd pull them out at the strangest times. Opponents couldn't prepare for that. How do you game plan against a guy who might throw something you've never even seen before? His reign lasted 7 years, 2006 to 2013. 7 years where he made middleweight look like it belonged to him and him alone. Guys would come in with good records, solid skills, real confidence, and Silva would just dismantle them, make them quit on their stools between rounds, knock them unconscious or submit them. It didn't matter. He had every way to win, and he'd use whichever one felt right in the moment. People forget how dominant he was because of how his career ended. The leg break against Chris Weidman was horrific. Then he lost some fights after coming back. But that prime Silva, that 2006 to 2013 version, was maybe the most dangerous striker the sport has ever seen. Guys were genuinely scared to fight him. And when your opponents are scared before the bell even rings, you have won the battle.
Unbeaten for over a decade.
Jose Aldo, if you look at his career, he is without a doubt one of the greatest pound-for-pound fighters ever.
Oh, look at that knee from Aldo. This is the opening he was looking for, and that is it.
We love him, man. This will always be his house. I told him he's the guy that, you know, from the WEC to the UFC, helped build the sport, this brand. We love him, and we always will.
Jose Aldo doesn't get talked about enough when people discuss the most dangerous champions in UFC history. Maybe it's because he's not screaming at press conferences or talking trash on social media. Maybe it's because his style wasn't flash, highlight reel kind of way. But if you actually look at what this guy did for nearly a decade, the numbers are absolutely terrifying. We're talking about a man who defended the featherweight title 9 times. 9. That's not just winning fights. That's systematically destroying every single challenger the UFC could throw at him for years. And the way he won these fights is what sets him apart. This wasn't about point fighting or safe decisions. Aldo was breaking people. His leg kicks were probably the most brutal weapon any champion has ever had. Fighters would come into the octagon confident, well-prepared, ready for war. And then Aldo would start chopping at their legs. Not just once or twice, constantly, relentlessly. You'd watch these guys try to check the kicks, try to move away, try to adjust their stance. Didn't matter. Aldo just kept coming. By the second round, you could see opponents literally limping between exchanges, their movement gone, their power compromised, their whole game plan falling apart because they couldn't plant their feet anymore. Urijah Faber found out the hard way. Faber was this dynamic wrestler with crazy scrambling ability, and Aldo just took that away from him. Kicked his legs until Faber couldn't shoot takedowns properly anymore. Then Aldo took him down, mounted him, and punched him until the referee stopped it. That's the thing about Aldo. He didn't just have one dangerous weapon. The leg kick set everything else up. His boxing was incredibly technical too. People forget that because the leg kicks were so devastating. But Aldo had genuinely elite hands. Fast combinations, perfect timing, power in both hands. He knocked out Cub Swanson in 8 seconds. 8 seconds. That's barely enough time to feel nervous. Swanson came forward and Aldo just detonated a flying knee that turned his lights off instantly. Then there was the Chad Mendes fights. Mendes was supposed to be the guy who could finally beat Aldo. Elite wrestler, heavy hands, tough as they come. Their first fight, Aldo knocked him out cold in the first round. Just caught him with a knee as Mendes was shooting for a takedown. Their second fight went longer, but Aldo still won. Still dominated the striking, still made it look easy against someone everyone said was his toughest matchup. What made Aldo so dangerous wasn't just his skills though, it was his fight IQ. He never really got caught in bad positions, never made the kind of mistakes that led opponents back into fights. He was always composed, always calculating, always steps ahead. Frankie Edgar couldn't figure him out across 5 rounds. Neither could Ricardo Lamas or Korean Zombie. These were killers in their own right, and Aldo made them look ordinary. His reign lasted from 2011 to 2015 as undisputed champion. Before that, he was the WEC champion. Basically, he went undefeated for a decade at the highest levels of MMA. The Conor McGregor loss gets talked about constantly because of the 13-second knockout, but that was one fight. One moment, it doesn't erase years of absolute dominance. Aldo is still one of the most complete fighters who ever lived, still one of the most dangerous champions the UFC has ever seen. The leg kicks alone put him in that conversation. Everything else just confirms it.
I don't know where you think DC now ranks all time in the history of UFC.
one of the best of all time. If you'll notice in the beginning of the fight, every shot he landed on Stipe was busting Stipe up, both his eyes, his nose. You know, when he goes in against somebody wrestling, the slam that he had on Dan Henderson, to do that to a guy like Dan Henderson, holy shit.
Daniel Cormier doesn't look like what people think a killer should look like. He's not tall, he's not shredded, he doesn't have that mean face that makes you think, oh, this guy's dangerous. But that's the thing about DC. He was probably one of the most dangerous champions the UFC ever had. People just didn't realize until it was too late. Let's start with the wrestling. Cormier was an Olympic wrestler, not just some guy who wrestled in college. Olympic level. He competed at the 2004 and 2008 Olympics. That's the highest level of wrestling you can possibly reach. And when you bring that kind of wrestling into MMA, you're basically bringing a cheat code. Fighters train their whole lives to stop takedowns, and Cormier would just walk through them like they weren't even there. Didn't matter how good your takedown defense was. Didn't matter if you'd trained with the best coaches. Cormier was taking you down, and once down there in his world, he'd smother you, control you, make you carry his weight for 25 minutes. By the third round, guys would be gasping for air while Cormier looked like he could go another 5 rounds easy. But here's what made him truly deadly: the striking. When Cormier first came to the UFC, people thought, okay, he's a wrestler. He'll take guys down and grind them out. Boring but effective. Except Cormier could punch, really punch. He knocked out Stipe Miocic in the first round to win the heavyweight title. Stipe Miocic, the guy who'd defended the heavyweight belt more times than anyone in history. Cormier starched him with a right hand that came out of nowhere. And it wasn't a lucky punch either. He did it again in the rematch. That combination of elite wrestling and knockout power made him impossible to game plan for. You couldn't just work on takedown defense because he'd knock you out. You couldn't just work on boxing because he'd take you down and maul you. Then there's the championship thing. Cormier held 2 belts simultaneously, light heavyweight and heavyweight. Only the second fighter in UFC history to do that. He defended the light heavyweight belt 3 times, defended the heavyweight belt twice, fought the absolute best guys in 2 different weight classes, and beat almost all of them. John Jones is the only guy who really had his number. And even then, people still argue about those fights because of all the substance stuff. The man retired with only 2 losses on his record, both to Jones, both controversial because of the drug tests. Against everyone else, DC was basically unbeatable. 22 wins, most of them finishes, most of them against killers. That's what made Daniel Cormier one of the deadliest champions ever. Not the way he looked, not the trash talk, just pure skill, championship heart, and the ability to hurt you in ways you couldn't prepare for.
He beat everyone he ever faced. He had 2 losses that were Matt Hughes and Matt Serra, right? And came back and destroyed them in the rematches. After retiring, comes back and wins a championship a division up.
The rear naked choke that was one of the tightest, most cinched up rear naked chokes I've ever seen anybody perform ever.
George St. Pierre might have been the most completed mixed martial artist ever, and that completeness made him absolutely deadly because there was no weakness to exploit. You couldn't outstrike him because his striking was technical and precise. Couldn't submit him because his jiu-jitsu was world class. Couldn't outlast him because his cardio was infinite. There was no way to beat GSP in his prime. No chance. His champion title from 2006 to 2013 with Reign had a brief interruption when Matt Serra caught him with that wild punch. But GSP came back from that loss and became even more dominant. 9 consecutive title defenses after reclaiming the belt. And those weren't easy fights. He was facing absolute killers. Take Dan Hardy, who was supposed to be this dangerous striker. GSP took him down repeatedly and almost submitted him multiple times. Jake Shields, who was supposed to be the grappling threat. GSP controlled him for 5 rounds. Carlos Condit, Johnny Hendricks, Nick Diaz, all of them were supposed to be the guy who finally cracked the code. None of them came close. What made GSP so deadly was the game planning. He'd study opponents for months and create strategies specifically, then he'd execute that strategy perfectly for 25 minutes. His jab alone was a weapon that shut down entire game plans. Guys couldn't get close to him because that jab was always there. Snap, snap, snap. Setting up takedowns. Keeping distance, controlling range. It was simple but completely effective, and once he got you down, good luck getting back up. His top control was suffocating. He would establish a dominant position, pass guard, and then start landing ground and pound. Not wild swinging. Calculated strikes designed to accumulate damage. By the 4th round, his opponents would be exhausted, bloody, and completely demoralized. That's how GSP won. He broke you down systematically until there was nothing left. The Hendricks fight was controversial. Some people thought Johnny won. Maybe he did on the scorecards, but even in that fight, even in what was supposed to be his toughest challenge, GSP found a way to survive and get his hand raised. That's championship mentality. That's what separates the great from the deadly. When things go wrong, when you're hurt, when the plan isn't working, you still find a way to win. and GSP always found a way. Just because he could. Just to prove there was nothing left to accomplish at welterweight, he'd go dominate a new weight class. He climbed up to middleweight and choked out Michael Bisping to become a 2-division champion. That's the GSP's legacy. No weaknesses, no excuses, just absolute dominance, completeness.